Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the first stream in 2.5 weeks. The last stream or video or anything I did on this channel was 2.5 weeks ago, the race review for the Bahrain Grand Prix of 2021. And I've had a decent break in between, some ups and some downs. And I'm feeling very much excited for this weekend's 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, where I think we're going to have a very, again, just like Bahrain, very close, very interesting weekend. Battle for the race win. Going to be interesting. I still think Mercedes are going to be very hard to beat, and I'll get onto that in a moment. But it's still going to be definitely a lot closer than I thought it would be at the start of the season. And then, of course, the midfield battle, just like it was at this circuit at the end of October, I think it was, when we raced here for 2020. It's going to be so close, so exciting, and I cannot wait for it. But hopefully you guys have done well or tried to keep as well as you could over the last, 2.5, 3 weeks. And yeah, hopefully you'll join me in previewing this Grand Prix for this weekend. But before we get into the teams and preview how I think they'll get on based off of, I guess you could say, the data or the facts we've had so far about the teams and drivers, let's first get into the championship standings. So, of course, the drivers' standings are just going to be the finishing order of the Bahrain Grand Prix. So, of course, Lewis Hamilton is in the lead from Max Verstappen second, Bottas third, Norris fourth, Perez fifth, and then Leclerc, Ricciardo, Sainz, Tsunoda, and Stroll round out the top 10. And then below that, you've got Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Ocon, and Russell. And then the rest of the drivers, you've got Vettel in 15th, Mick Schumacher in 16th place. And then the last four drivers there, Pierre Gasly, Nicholas Latifi, Fernando Alonso, and Nikita Mazepin. And then the constructor standings are this: Mercedes top by 13 points, Red Bull second, McLaren third, Ferrari fourth, AlphaTauri 5th, Aston Martin 6th, and then on 0 points, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Williams, and the Haas F1 team. So you can see already in there in the midfield, teams from 5th to 8th really need to get a move on already in this Grand Prix to make sure they don't lose too much ground to McLaren and Ferrari, who have made a flying start compared to, say, AlphaTauri and Aston Martin, and of course, the rest below them. So again, important weekend in the midfield, as it always will be in 2021. But let's just get straight into it and start off with the world champions Mercedes, who put in a great performance on the race day in Bahrain to get the race win. Yes, it came in controversial circumstances, but I think Mercedes did deserve the race win because they did everything right. Lewis Hamilton was at his brilliant best, and they outdid Red Bull on the strategy and just outdid Red Bull just about enough to win the Grand Prix, so you have to give them credit. And I think, and this will be a common theme during tonight's stream, especially because there's been a 3-week break, there are teams, because of that 3-week break, that will be noticeably different, I think, this weekend compared to what you may expect of them or what we saw in Bahrain. For example, as we'll get into later, Alpine are bringing, I think, a sizable upgrade that will hopefully improve their performance compared to what it was in Bahrain. I think Haas as well are bringing properly their new 2021 car. So this weekend is not just going to be the pecking order from Bahrain. It's going to be different. And I think as time goes on, I think as I said 2-3 weeks ago, as time goes on, I think Mercedes will improve. I think Mercedes eventually will have the best car. And I think this 3-week break will have been, or it should have been, considering what this team's normally like, should have been a very good and productive 3-week break where they've probably made, not massive, because they are limited now with the amount of time they're allowed in the wind tunnel, but I'm sure they've understood a lot more of what their car is for 2021 and the improvements they need to make, and they probably have made a couple small improvements for this Grand Prix. I'm sure Red Bull as well They've got something in the pipeline for this Grand Prix, and the Grand Prix is coming up after this. So it's still going to be close-ish, but I think for this weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes were not back to how they were in 2020, but at least stronger in qualifying than they were in Bahrain, because I think Bahrain, even though I refuse to believe it until the end of qualifying, they weren't as quick as Red Bull in Bahrain. Red Bull weren't massively quicker. I think it was, 10th or 2 at most, nothing special. But Mercedes really, in that Grand Prix, did the best they could with the car they had for that period. Now we come to Imola. I am expecting Mercedes, like I said, not to go straight back into 2020 mode and just obliterate Red Bull this weekend, but to be just overall stronger. And probably, well, I'll be honest, I do think Mercedes will get pole position this weekend, but I don't think, after what we saw in Bahrain, it will be as dominant as maybe I thought it would, say, 2 months ago. So it's going to be still a close fight, but I just think as time goes on, and this 3-week break would have played very nicely for Mercedes, that they will improve. And I think, even though Max Verstappen has actually come out and said that, if we do go on to, or if they, he means we as in Red Bull, go on to, compete for the championship seriously, then not winning in Bahrain won't be that big of a deal. Well, it might actually turn out to be big of a deal, because considering the car they had compared to Mercedes, they really did need to get that race win, just so they could get some sort of foothold in a championship battle of sorts. So I think Mercedes, it's still going to be a weekend that's not troubling, but a lot tougher than they probably were expecting, again, 2 or 3 months ago when they were looking at this part of the calendar. But as long as they perform how they did in qualifying in the race from Bahrain, if they replicate that in terms of getting the best out of what they have and not making mistakes, they're still the team to beat for me. They're still the team to beat. And I thought at Imola last year they were very, very good. And I still don't see, unless Max Verstappen puts in a stonking performance again, I still think it's hard to see them not winning the Grand Prix. And as I'll get onto now with Red Bull, and in particular Max Verstappen, because of certain records to do with who wins the championship at the end of the year, Max Verstappen really does, if he's going to compete for the championship in 2021, he has got to win this weekend, or even next week, not next weekend, but the next Grand Prix in 2 weeks in Portugal. Because I think, as you guys may know, no driver who has won the first 3 Grand Prix has ever lost the championship. Drivers who have won the first 3 Grand Prix, I think, are drivers such as Nico Rosberg in 2016. I think Michael Schumacher in 2004 as well won the first 3 Grand Prix. And then there's other cases, back in the day. I think 1994 as well, Michael Schumacher won the first 3 races and went on to win the championship, even though, of course, that was in dubious circumstances. You get what I mean. It's a record that has stood the test of time, and already, because Max failed to get the race win in Bahrain through just not having enough compared to the all-dominant Mercedes, this weekend already becomes a very important race weekend, because if, let's say, Max Verstappen finishes 3rd, which I can't really see, if he finishes the Grand Prix and doesn't really have any problems, I don't see him finishing 3rd, because I think, even though Bottas wasn't that bad in Bahrain, I see Verstappen ahead of him for this weekend. If, Max Verstappen, say, again, for whatever reason, finishes 3rd, and Hamilton wins the Grand Prix, then the championship gap goes up to what? 17, 18 points. 18 points, of course, if Lewis Hamilton gets a fastest lap point, or 16 points if Verstappen does. and Verstappen finishes third compared to Hamilton in first, then that puts massive pressure on Max Verstappen going into the Portuguese Grand Prix to win that race. Because if he doesn't and Hamilton wins, then if history continues to repeat itself, then Lewis Hamilton will be world champion. And I do believe if Hamilton does win the next 2 Grand Prix, that it's not absolutely dead and buried, because of course, you know, records are there to be broken and you can never say never in life, but very, very, very hard to see if Hamilton wins the next 2 Grand Prix. Again, very, very hard to see Max Verstappen then winning the championship after losing the first 3 races. So I think really this weekend, more so than the Portuguese Grand Prix, he's got to win and avenge, really, the loss that was suffered in Bahrain. Wasn't a bad loss, but considering the speed in qualifying, really throughout the entire weekend, and even during that first stint, they can't afford to now just slip behind and let, you know, Mercedes walk all over them. If they're going to actually be in a title fight with Mercedes, they have got to respond immediately this weekend and show that they haven't, you know, they weren't just quick in Bahrain because their car was well suited to that track, that they are going to be there with Max Verstappen for the entire season. So vital, if Verstappen is going to win the championship this year, which I don't think he will, but it'd be great to see him and Hamilton right at it to the end. But if he's going to be in that position, he has to win this weekend, I feel, because let's say even if Red Bull do have that slightly quicker car, you can't afford to keep giving Mercedes race wins, because as we saw when Mercedes fought Ferrari, for example, in 2018, when Ferrari had the faster car, the reason they lost that championship is when they had the faster car, they weren't capitalizing on that, which is what Red Bull basically did in Bahrain. They had the faster car, they didn't capitalize on it because they just didn't get the strategy right, which is obviously something Ferrari are, I won't say famous, but infamous for doing. So, big weekend for Verstappen. Last year, he was very good, especially in the race. I thought he put in a great race performance here at Imola. So, he can win the Grand Prix, but he has to, I think he's got to at least be on the front row if he's going to win the race. Of course, if he gets pole position, that would be great, because if you look at the, you know, history of getting pole at Imola, it's pretty good, I think, if you look back. Actually, no, correct that. It's actually not very good. I was just thinking back in my head, what's the pole to win record at Imola? It's actually not that good. But obviously, considering how hard it is to overtake, pole position is more important here for sure than it is in Bahrain, because Bahrain, you can easily reverse a poor grid position because of the amount of space to overtake. So, I hope, not because I don't want Mercedes to win or anything, but I do hope we see a response from Max Verstappen this weekend, because Hamilton versus Verstappen for the championship is the best thing for the sport right now. It's the thing we want to see, and I think it'd just be great if we had that for this season and not just, again, another year of Mercedes domination, even though I still think, pessimistically, that's what we are heading for. So yeah, hopefully a response from Max Verstappen this weekend, and then hopefully Sergio Perez will be up there in the top 4 or 5, helping his teammate in any possible fight with the Mercedes drivers. But before we get into the upper midfield, guys, let me know in the chat and also in the comments section if you're watching this after the stream is finished. When it comes to Mercedes and Red Bull, what do you think will happen between those two this weekend? Who do you see getting pole position? And who do you see coming out on top at the end, of course, of the Grand Prix on Sunday? At the minute, my gut feeling is that it'll be Hamilton on pole from Verstappen second, and then in the race, I have no idea out of Hamilton and Verstappen, because I think it'll be so close, it'll come down like it did in Bahrain to one crucial moment, such as a pit stop or an out lap or an in lap or whatever. I think that's what it'll come down to, but if I was to pick right now, I would probably slightly give it to Lewis Hamilton just because I trust Mercedes more to get it right than I do Red Bull. But let me know in the chat, what do you think? Do you think Max will win the Grand Prix this weekend? And how vital do you think it is that he does win the Grand Prix if he's going to maintain a championship battle for the season? Let me just look at the chat to see what you guys have to say. Great to see some of you in the chat already. Rooksfoot in the chat. Nib. Ed. Great to see you all here. Rooksfoot says, hey Chaz, I can't wait for the race weekend to start. Absolutely. Etienne Stevens says, rain expected. Yeah, it's always expected, isn't it? Rain is always expected unless it's, you know, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, what will later this season be Saudi Arabia. Unless it's those races, then obviously it's going to be dry. But whenever we have a Grand Prix at a venue where there's a possibility of rain, there's always rumours of rain. I remember the Spanish Grand Prix. I always bring this up, but it really has shaped my opinion on this ever since. But 2018 Spanish Grand Prix, right before the Grand Prix, they put on the screen, FOM, that 90% chance of rain, and it didn't rain once and was sunny, I think, for most of the race. So let's hope so, but it's Italy, so it's probably not going to rain. Nib, here we go. Mercedes propaganda back again. Well, out of Bahrain, Mercedes, you know, they took the points when they mattered. Don't get any points for Saturday, of course. I think, like I said, though, I know it's race 2 out of 23, but if Hamilton was to win this weekend, it really just does look like it's going his way again. So that's why I think it is a vital weekend for Max Verstappen to just bounce back and not let Hamilton start building a gap. I mean, I know it's only 7 points after one race, but he doesn't want to, you know, it get to 17 points and then Hamilton wins again in Portugal and then, you know, Max Verstappen has to defy history to win the championship. So, yeah. Ed Cantwell says Red Bull have a one-lap monster. Not sure about that. Oh, the Iceman as well says Schumacher in 2000 as well. When it comes to the, you know, winning the first 3 races normally means you win the championship. Yeah, that is true. And I'm trying to think of any others. I think Damon Hill in 96 as well. I think that's another one. And then there's probably one with Senna or Prost back in the day where they won the first 3 races. So, as you can see, if you win the first 3 races, and I think this record eventually will be broke, but I don't think it'll be this year because it's not like Mercedes have got obvious chinks in their armor. So, I think, you know what? I'm just going to say it. And I know some in the chat will possibly cry at this. But if Lewis Hamilton wins this weekend and in Portugal, then even if the gap is only, say, 21, 22 points at best for Verstappen, but Hamilton has won the first 3 races, I will call the championship is over. Because I believe in history and I believe in stats. So there you go. If Hamilton wins the next 2 races, then it's over. Because I just don't see Verstappen this season, you know, breaking that record. I just don't see it. I don't think Red Bull and him will be strong enough to do it. Hopefully, though, he'll just win the Grand Prix this weekend and we won't have to get into that situation in a couple of weeks where we're, you know, umming and ahhing over will he get the win in Portugal and prevent him having to defy history. So, yeah, we'll see. Laurie says, I'm not saying Bottas will win or even claim pole position, but Bottas did take pole last year and had great pace until debris hampered his chances of winning the race. That is true. He will be a factor this weekend for sure, especially if he can out-qualify Sergio Perez, which I think he definitely will. He will be a factor. I just don't know how much of a factor he will be. To be honest, best case scenario is Valtteri gets pole position and Max is second and Hamilton is third. Because then, of course, the first in the championship will be, at the back end of those three, and the third in the championship would be at the front end of those three, which would make the Grand Prix very interesting. Just like, say, the first half of last year's race at Imola. So I'm not denying he'll have an effect. I just don't know how much of an effect he will have, because Bahrain, I thought, was a bit underwhelming from Valtteri, to be honest. I was expecting not massively more, but a tad more at certain stages. I just don't think, and I know he had the pit stop problem, but I just don't think Valtteri quite had the speed during the race to really affect what was going on ahead of him, and was always kind of third best out of the out of the entire field. Joshua Salt, have Mercedes announced any upgrades for this race, mainly referencing their floor? I haven't seen anything as of yet, but I'm sure there is something to their car overall. It's probably small. It's not going to be anything massive. Because, again, remember, Mercedes have the least amount of time in the wind tunnel this season, because, of course, they finished first in the championship last year. So they won't be able to bring, massive upgrades, say, every 6-7 races like they could have done last year or the year before. So I think from this season for Mercedes, you're only going to see tweaks at certain points. You're not going to see just a massive upgrade and then that's it. Or, maybe a bit of an upgrade here and a bit of an upgrade there and that's it. I think you're just going to see during the season, so they can still technically develop the car as the season goes on. They'll just tweak the car as the season goes along. Red Bull, I think, will kind of do the same, but they'll have more wind tunnel time, meaning they'll have slightly more room to bring in a bigger upgrade. So I think it's definitely going to be and I think I said this once I was kind of proven wrong after qualifying in Bahrain. It's definitely going to be a more interesting season, a much more interesting season between Mercedes and Red Bull, no doubt about it. But in terms of the actual results of the championships, I still think it's heading only in one direction. Anyway, I think we'll move on now to the midfield and the upper midfield, and we'll start off with McLaren, who had a very good Grand Prix. P4 of Lando Norris in Bahrain. Daniel Ricciardo was P7, and I think that's just a great start for McLaren. It really was. It was exactly what they needed. Maybe Ricciardo could have done better compared to Charles Leclerc, but again, it wasn't, they weren't ever going to finish 4th and 5th in that Grand Prix, because the midfield is so strong that it wasn't, that wasn't always on, I don't think, getting that strong of a finish. But this weekend, I think they have a massive fight on their hands, and I don't think they've got it easy at all this weekend. And I'd actually say, if you look at the strengths and weaknesses of the McLaren, I think this weekend will probably be a weaker weekend for McLaren, because as something that Lando Norris pointed out in a press conference he did earlier, McLaren's pace over a single lap in Bahrain wasn't that good. Their race pace was really good, and I think the McLaren car undoubtedly is probably I'm just trying to think. No, I'd say it is. It's undoubtedly the best race car in terms of race pace out of the midfield. I think Bahrain showed that, especially with Lando Norris. So, because Imola, again, it really, if you're going to do well at this circuit, unless you get a mental Grand Prix with a few retirements, your result is really going to come down to how well or how not well you do in qualifying. Last year, of course, McLaren didn't really do that well at all. I think they were P9 and P10, and they ended up finishing, I think, 7th and 8th, which was the absolute best they could do. And at the time, I think they were quite disappointed with that because they didn't really get enough points for them for what they felt they should have been getting from that weekend. So I think McLaren, if that does play out again, that their qualifying pace isn't quite there, then they might have a bit of a struggle in the Grand Prix, because I am expecting AlphaTauri and Ferrari to be very strong this weekend. I'd probably say because of the quality of drivers Ferrari have, and because of the, I think, definite aerodynamic superiority that I think Ferrari do have over McLaren. It's not a massive superiority, but it is definitely there. A slight one, I'd say. I think this weekend they're going to have a real fight on their hands if they're going to beat both Ferrari and AlphaTauri. I'm expecting AlphaTauri to be probably the quickest team out of the midfield in qualifying, followed by Ferrari, and then McLaren. And then in the race, I think in the race it'll be very close, but again, because of qualifying and how important it is, because it is so hard to overtake at Imola, even though the DRS zones have been extended, it's still going to be very hard because Imola is so tight of a circuit. It's almost like a street circuit at times, how tight the circuit is. So if they do, again, not have that great of a qualifying performance, I think McLaren might struggle to get a result as anywhere near as good as what they got in Bahrain. If AlphaTauri, can get both cars in the points, I'm sure they'll be very strong. Ferrari, I'm sure, will be strong as well. So definitely a tougher Grand Prix for McLaren. I still think they'll get a double points finish though, but I don't think it'll be 18 points they'll be getting from this Grand Prix like they got in Bahrain. I think at most kind of what they got last year, which was 10 points. I think that's probably the at most they can get. Because, again, I do expect AlphaTauri and Ferrari to be very, very quick. And talking of Ferrari, let's get into them now. I thought Bahrain was a very good weekend considering my expectations for the Scuderia. I think you could clearly see from the data that I showed in my race review, and I think my race preview as well, that Ferrari have made definite progress on the power unit, which, of course, is going to help this season. And aerodynamically, they have probably the third best car on the grid. Again, not by a massive distance, but it's definitely, I would say, from the data that I have observed so far, Ferrari look as though they have the third best car, aerodynamically speaking, on the grid. And at Imola, that will help, because the second half of the laps, you do need a lot of, I'd say, rear-end grip to really hold the car down and to keep it through those fast sections of the circuit flowing and getting the lap time that it should be getting. So that's why I think McLaren, who I don't think have quite the grip that Ferrari have, I think that's why they will struggle a tad more than Ferrari this weekend. I think AlphaTauri probably have the best balance between, say, the power unit and the aerodynamic side, because I think aerodynamically, AlphaTauri, they've, again, like I said, they've kind of got a similar situation to Red Bull, where they haven't really got a weak point. They're basically equally as strong in both areas. So I think Ferrari, because of their drivers as well, I think that also made a big difference in Bahrain, because of the quality of drivers and what they'll be able to drag out of the car. I could see Ferrari locking out the third row at Imola. I don't think they'll get on the podium. I think the only way that's going to happen is if one of the front three, like last year, retired from the race for whatever reason. But I think, say, a fourth or a fifth, if, say, Sergio Perez is not quite at it again, I don't think that'd be a surprise, to be honest, because I think, again, because of the quality of the drivers and because the car is definitely massively improved on last year, I think Ferrari are looking definitely strong for this weekend. And, of course, it's a home Grand Prix, so I think the drivers are going to be a tad more keener to perform in front of, even though there's no fans there, there'll still be, millions watching, of course, the Grand Prix. So I think Ferrari, if you're a Ferrari fan, I'd expect a strong weekend. Don't be expecting a podium, because I don't think it's going to be that good, even though it would be great if they could get up there. And I think next up we're going to Aston Martin. I think I made this point in Bahrain, and I think I really can only repeat it now when it comes to this preview for them for this season. Aston Martin, at the moment, just do not have a car as good as the AlphaTauri, the Ferrari, or the McLaren. That's clear to see. I think aerodynamically speaking, they're way off where Ferrari are. And probably AlphaTauri as well, and McLaren. When I say way off, I'm not talking half a second. I'm talking more so 2.5 to 3 tenths. Still, though, in that midfield battle, that's a bit of a gap. That is a bit of a gap when I think between AlphaTauri, Ferrari, and McLaren, you're talking at most a tenth and a half. Again, at most. So I think Aston Martin, I said this in Bahrain, again, they don't have the car at the moment, and I do think they will start the season slowly, because you have to remember they had a very much lack of reliability in testing, didn't get that much running in practice, especially with Sebastian Vettel. So they haven't really, they're very similar, I'd say, to Mercedes. They haven't quite worked out the full picture of where they are in regards to everyone else. And they also, I don't think, have worked out quite how to set the car up, the balance of the car, so on and so forth. And I think it will take this team time. I still, and I said this, I think, in my season preview, I reckon once we get to, say, Monaco or Baku, which is what, end of May, start of June, I reckon that's when you'll see Aston Martin start to really kick on, get, regular points finishes, and start getting after teams like McLaren and AlphaTauri. But at the moment, it is going to be a struggle, because they, as I said, they haven't quite found what the balance is with their car yet, and the drivers, I think, did as well as they could have in Bahrain. This weekend, it's hard to say exactly where they'll be, but I'd say my expectation would be definitely behind AlphaTauri, McLaren, Ferrari, and I would say also behind Alfa Romeo as well. I don't think they'll be ahead of Alfa Romeo, because I think Alfa Romeo do have a car that around this circuit this weekend will be a lot better suited. The Alfa Romeo aerodynamically looks a lot more balanced and comfortable than the Aston Martin does. I think Aston Martin will be ahead of Alpine and the Williams and the Haas team, but honestly, it would be a phenomenal job by whoever it is to get, say, a top 10 qualifying position or even a points finish, because again, I just don't see this car at the moment in that type of position, and I don't think they'll be in a position where they'll have a car good enough for that until, say, Monaco. Hopefully sooner, but I think it's going to be a real struggle until then. Hopefully, though, if we do get, say, 2 or 3 drivers here or there drop out of the race who would otherwise normally be in that top 10 at the end of a Grand Prix, then hopefully from their point of view, they can nick a point or two to at least keep up some sort of points, going ahead for the rest of the season. Because what they don't want to do is go, say, the next 3 races without scoring a point and then be miles behind McLaren and Ferrari and then have too much, time to gain points back. So hopefully it's a bit better than what I'm saying, but I just don't see this team at the minute really on the same level as AlphaTauri, McLaren, Ferrari. Even though the midfield is still close-ish, for me there is a gap at the minute. It's AlphaTauri, McLaren, Ferrari, and then there's a small gap of, say, quarter of a second to teams like Alfa Romeo Aston Martin, Alpine, and then you've got another, say, 3-4 tenths back to Williams, and then another, however, back to Haas. So the midfield, it's not all, they're not all on the same level playing field at the minute in terms of speed, but I think we can already see so far a pecking order in terms of what fights are happening or going to happen at certain parts of the grid. Anyway, let's get into Alpine. Alpine, as I said earlier, they have brought a sizable upgrade to the Grand Prix, which is very good for them, and they desperately needed it because they were so bad in Bahrain in the Grand Prix. They had no straight line speed. They're getting passed everywhere. The grip of the car compared to really all the cars out there except the Williams and the Haas looked poor. Fernando Alonso, I think, did a phenomenal job, and he's been saying that he still thinks he has to massively improve, but I don't really see him needing to improve that much because I do think the car he is driving for this season just looks poor. And I still think Alpine, after what I saw and after what I've just felt so far this year, I think Alpine will have a poor season. Hopefully, though, that upgrade, can work for them. Give them an extra tenth or two, because that definitely would help push them to the edge of getting in the top 10 and maybe nicking a point or two, again, if there's a few retirements. But I still don't think Alpine, at this current point, until we see actual hard, facts and data behind it, I don't think right now you can say Alpine are in a position to score points this weekend, because their car overall looks poor. Again, not enough grip and definitely not enough straight line speed. Looks as though they've got the slowest car in a straight line this season. So, yeah, not looking good at all. Hopefully, though, things do improve. But I want to get on next to AlphaTauri, because I think this team is definitely going to be the team out of the midfield to look out for. Because, of course, last year, they were the quickest midfield team. Pierre Gasly, if he did finish the race, I think would have got probably a podium. Because even though he lost position to Ricciardo at the start, he was right behind him in the first few laps and then had to retire. So I think AlphaTauri, if there's going to be a surprise had, it's going to be them making the news when it comes to a shock. I think we did kind of, though, say that in Bahrain, and it didn't quite play out, but I think that was just down to Gasly making a small error, clipping the back of, I think, Daniel Ricciardo's rear wheel, which was a shame, but, those things happen. I think if Gasly had not had that poor start and had, maintained 5th or 6th at the start of the Grand Prix, I think Pierre Gasly probably would have finished in 4th place in Bahrain, and AlphaTauri in the Constructors would be looking a lot stronger than they are now, where they're already 16 points behind McLaren after one Grand Prix. So if they can replicate the performance of last year, and the two drivers who I think have started well this season, I can't really see any faults in their driving so far. If they can continue that and put in a great performance, of course, for the team at one of their home races, then I don't see why AlphaTauri won't be really quick. Still, though, compared to Ferrari and McLaren, it is still hard to say exactly where they'll be. Because, again, McLaren Sainz, I'm sure, are going to be very quick. And Ferrari, I think, are going to be quick. McLaren is still going to be very much in there. It's very hard to call those three teams. But I definitely think, after Mercedes and Red Bull, those are the three teams that are going to follow. Just don't know really for sure in which order it's going to be yet. But definitely look out for AlphaTauri, because they could yet again cause a surprise this weekend. Next up, Alfa Romeo. I think Alfa Romeo this weekend, I think they can, like they did last year, get a points finish. It's going to be tough because they don't have, as yet, as quick of a car as, like I said, AlphaTauri, Ferrari, McLaren, or even, I think, Aston Martin, or possibly Alpine as well, at least in qualifying trim. I think if they can make it, say, a good start to the race, gain a couple positions and maintain their usual great, race pace, then I don't see why they can't at least be close to a points finish like they were in Bahrain. They've got the drivers, they've got the speed. It really just does come down to qualifying, which I also think their power unit still doesn't quite help enough with that, because even though the Ferrari power unit has improved, they're still lacking a bit, say 5 kilometers an hour to Honda and Mercedes, which in qualifying makes a massive difference. So if they can maybe get a bit of a better qualifying position than I expect, then I think a point is possible, but we'll just have to see in the Grand Prix. Hopefully, though, another strong weekend, because I was really pleased to see how strong they were in Bahrain. And to be honest, they could have actually scored a point if Kimi Räikkönen had been moved ahead of Antonio Giovinazzi sooner in the first stint of the Grand Prix, because he was right behind him for a while, and that held Räikkönen up when he should have been moved past, because Räikkönen only ended up, I think, 2 seconds behind Stroll at the end for a point. So really, they were quite unfortunate not to get a point, but it was down to their own poor decision making. And then the last couple teams, you got Williams. I think this man on screen, Mr. Saturday, George Russell, will put in another very good performance. I don't think he'll score points, but I could see another 13th, 14th place out of him for sure. And then, of course, Haas F1 are pure shit. But yeah, there you go. Let me just go back to Ferrari with the pictures, and I'll just ask you guys, for the midfield, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, again, it's very hard to call, as it will be for every single time we do a preview. It's going to be hard to say who's going to finish where. It should get easier as the season goes on to say who's going to be where, but it will still be hard, like I said, for every single Grand Prix, because certain drivers will put in certain performances to upset the order. You know, drivers like Alonso, Leclerc, Sainz, Vettel, Raikkonen, drivers like that, even Russell. So, what do you think the midfield pecking order is going to be? I'm still not sure. I think the 2 front-running midfield teams in my mind are probably Ferrari and AlphaTauri, and then McLaren as, say, 5th quickest. And then after that, I'd say I'm going to go Alfa Romeo 6th, and then Aston Martin, Alpine, Williams, Haas. I think that is what I'll go for. But I'm sure that'll be massively wrong even after the first 2 practice sessions. So yeah, let me know in the comments in the chat. What do you think it's most likely going to be, and who are you really looking out for this weekend? Tonka, will Tsunoda give Gasly a run for his money? Hard to say. I'd say no, because Pierre, of course, last year raced here and put in a great performance, a really great performance in qualifying. And Yuki Tsunoda, I don't think, even though he did drive here in the winter with the new car, he hasn't got as much experience as Pierre. So, I mean, at least with Bahrain, Yuki did have experience from previous formulas of racing at that track. So, that did help a lot, and it did. You can't deny that. But this weekend, again, it'll be tougher because Pierre, last time he raced here, he was as close to perfect as you could be. He really, really was. Let me find some other comments here if I can. Hello to Mike. Let me see if there's any other comments here I can read out quick. By the way, when it comes to the story in the description, I will get onto that in just a moment. Actually, you know what? Considering most people, almost everyone's talking about, let's just get straight into it. So, the Canadian Grand Prix, according to Radio Canada, and now according to other people, is going to be cancelled because the local health authority in Montreal does not believe it can hold the race safely, even without spectators. Now, Formula One are still insisting that they are holding negotiations But if the if the local health authority says they're not going to hold the race, then it's not going to happen, is it? It's disappointing if that's the case, because I think Formula One has easily proven that it can hold a Grand Prix without spectators and not worsen the COVID situation in any particular country. The only outbreak I think they had was in Russia at the end of September, when everyone was beginning their second wave. So I don't think Formula One really, I don't think you can really say that they haven't got the protocols in place to hold a Grand Prix in Canada. I think they absolutely do. And to be honest, I think Canada, or at least the local health authority there in Montreal, I think they're being a bit too cautious with this, because again, Formula One has proven it can safely operate and not interfere with the, I guess you'd say, community when it comes to the spread of the virus. And, if they don't hold it with spectators, then I don't see a situation arising where something really bad happens, or bad at all happens. I just don't see it. And I think that, again, the local health authority is being way too cautious, because Formula One has proven time and time again that they can hold races in this weird time that we're all going through. So, yeah, I think, that's a real shame if that's the case. I would like to see them, if they are negotiating with FOM, I would like to see them at least try and hold the race, because I think if they try to hold the race, I think they'll actually be surprised as to, how good the protocol that Formula One has for COVID, and how it won't actually make a difference, a serious difference to, COVID numbers in Canada. And also, let's remember, because COVID is very much seasonal, at the moment, of course, in Canada, I'm understanding that the situation is not good, but it is currently April. So of course, it's not hot in Canada, but in June, it'll be a lot hotter. So this COVID situation shouldn't, in theory, be as bad, because again, COVID is affected massively by the seasons and temperature. So I think I think, honestly, if they are still in negotiations, which I really hope they are, they should. I think the Canadian Grand Prix organisers and the public, or the local health authority in Montreal, I think they should give it a go, because I think they should, have this race, and then, they can easily just learn from the protocols that Formula One have in place for future sporting events, not just Formula One, but everything. Because, again, Formula One has only had one outbreak. If you look at loads of sports leagues in Canada and America, how many outbreaks have they had? I mean, in the NFL, they've had countless outbreaks in teams where teams have ended up not fielding players in their actual position, and teams have basically had to not literally forfeit games, but basically forfeit games, not playing players who, well, if you understand American football terminology, not playing an actual quarterback in the quarterback position because of outbreaks and shit like that. So I think they would actually learn a thing or two, having Formula One there, that, with the environment Formula One creates, this bubble, that it can be done. Holding sport events in this current time period can be done safely. So I hope it can be, it can go ahead, but my hope isn't great. And by the looks of it, there are a couple tracks on standby. You have the Turkish Grand Prix track in Istanbul Park is on standby. I think the Nürburgring is on standby as well. I would prefer the Nürburgring, to be honest, and I think a early June race at the Nürburgring would really be nice. I think the Turkish Grand Prix as well would be nice, but I like the Nürburgring a lot better, so I honestly would love it if they could get that back on the calendar yet again. But yeah, at the minute, looks as though the Canadian Grand Prix is off the calendar for 2021. And I think I'll go back to some other pictures quick. Dexter Hall asks, what did I miss? Pretty much all of it. Pretty much all of it. Let me look at some other comments here in the chat if I can. 1PR007 says, I'm a huge Hamilton fan, but I only see a Red Bull 1-2 on this track. You're being way too pessimistic, and I think you're believing a lot of the media hype a bit too much. Red Bull, don't get me wrong, Red Bull are going to be there with Max Verstappen at least to give Mercedes some trouble. But ultimately, in my view, Mercedes are still the favourites because it's Mercedes. I mean, look at Bahrain. It looks certain that they wouldn't win, and they won. That's what great teams do, and they're still obviously a great team. So I don't see what will be massively different about Imola this weekend. I mean, of course, it will be probably harder to do. Say if Verstappen gets pole again from Hamilton, it'll probably be harder to do the same strategy they did in Bahrain for this race because the undercut isn't as powerful at Imola, isn't anywhere near as powerful at Imola as it is in Bahrain. Because reasons is one, I think the tyre selections they have. Secondly, the surface and the temperature. And thirdly, if you pit before someone else and you come out in a bit of traffic, at Imola, it's way harder to overtake. So the undercut's not really that powerful at Imola unless you have a completely free track. So I think I definitely though think in qualifying, as I said earlier, I think Mercedes will be definitely a lot stronger. Josiah Boateng, how long do you think it'll be until Merc start upgrading their car in response to Red Bull? Well, if they haven't got an upgrade for this weekend, it'll definitely be coming for the races that are in about 2 or 3 weeks from now, which are Portugal and Spain, no doubt about it, because they'll have to respond eventually to Red Bull and their massive improvement on last year. So Mercedes will definitely bring upgrades, as I said earlier, but even though in Bahrain Red Bull were quicker, I don't think there's any reason for Mercedes to panic. I don't think there is. Yeah, it's going to be harder this season, but I've not seen anything so far compared to, say, the more so difficult years of 2018 and 2017. I've not seen anything so far that suggests that Mercedes are in trouble or they need to start panicking about this season. I've not seen anything to suggest that, so still looks okay. Let me look at some other comments here quick. Tonka saying Aston Martin here kind of locked into their design. Going to take a stroke of genius to get MB and AM back on track. I think you mean Mercedes-Benz and Aston Martin, don't you? Yeah, Aston Martin. They are, like you say, they are kind of locked in to what they've got because they haven't got that particular rake design that Red Bull have, and that other teams like AlphaTauri, for example, have got, which is allowing them to be definitely a lot stronger this season than they were in 2020. And that's what's causing, say, Aston Martin and I think possibly, I was going to say possibly Alpine, but I've heard Alpine have also got the same rake design, but clearly hasn't worked for them so far. But I think definitely that's what's causing the moves up and down the field is that rake and that rear floor changes we've seen in 2021. And then I think this final comment, because we've done, 55 minutes, I think I'll read out this final comment before I get to the end of the stream from Francisco, who says, guys, going on long first stints will most likely benefit. I think drivers that take good care of their tires will perform well. This race, and like you say, it'll be good for drivers starting, especially in the midfield. Drivers starting outside the top 10, especially in P11, because if you can start on, say, the medium tyre and have a decent start, get say up to 8th, 9th place, and then people start pitting. If they get held up in traffic, which they will, because so many cars outside the top 10 will be trying to go very long into the race like they were last year, whoever's at the front of that pack who hasn't pitted yet will benefit a lot. Look at last year with Sergio Perez. That's why he should have got a podium, but Racing Point made a massive mistake by pitting him. And I think it was, Kimi Räikkönen. He went, 45 laps or 50 laps into the race and ended up finishing in 9th place. So, like you say, going as far as you can into the Grand Prix will benefit you massively. And I think most importantly, if you can do the race, the 63 laps, with the most amount of free, clean air as you can, that will definitely benefit you the most. Especially at this track. In Bahrain, even if you've got cars ahead of you and you're within a second and you're in the dirty air, it doesn't really give a massive effect to your race result because you can overtake in so many places. At Imola, it can literally make or break your Grand Prix. Kind of similar to Monaco, but not as bad as what it is in Monaco. So, yeah. That's why with teams like Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, I don't think you can count them out absolutely for a points finish, because if they can have a decent start and then go, say, 30 to 35 laps into the race on one set of tyres, and you got, AlphaTauri, Ferrari, Mclaren getting held up in traffic, that brings them back into the fight. So we're definitely going to have a very close battle in that midfield pack, if my throat will allow me to speak. But guys, that is it for today's preview for the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix this weekend, Imola. Just to update you guys before I go as to the the running order, the proceedings on this channel for the weekend. It's basically the same as it was in Bahrain. So I will be doing a practice 3 watch along at 9 or 10? No, it's 9. Sorry. Practice 3 watch along, because I've just remembered they've moved it an hour forward because of Prince Philip's funeral on Saturday. Practice 3 and qualifying. So I'll be doing a practice 3 watch along at 9:45 a.m. UK time. And then, of course, practice 3 will start at 10 a.m. And then I'll be live again at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the 1 p.m. start for qualifying. And then at 5 p.m. UK time on Saturday, this is on Saturday, I will be live again for a race preview. Like I did in Bahrain, later that night I did a race preview. And then on Sunday, the race watch along with me and Nib at 1:30 p.m. UK time until about 4 p.m. UK time. And then on Monday night will be a race review from 7 p.m. UK time until probably 8:30, 9 p.m. that night. That's the schedule for the weekend. Again, basically the same as it was in Bahrain. And because, views and I guess attention to the channel was a lot better than, say, I was expecting, I don't really see a reason to, change that schedule. I really don't see a reason to do that. And I think you guys definitely enjoyed it. So I think, that's a good schedule for the weekend. And that's pretty much the schedule I'm going to do or go with for the season. So make sure on Saturday, again, to join me from 9:45 a.m. UK time, eventually all the way until, 6 p.m. UK time that night. Obviously not continuously. I'll be stopping and starting here or there for different sessions and that. But, all Saturday I'll have you covered for Formula 1 and Sunday, of course, as well. And the review on Monday. But, guys, thank you very much for coming along and watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my channel page and do it there. Don't forget to smash the like button and share this video everywhere you can. As well, check out the videos down below from Bahrain, the race watch along, and the race review if you did miss our coverage of that. And as well, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. There's almost 500 people on that server, and also it's a great place to be to get notifications for when I go live and upload videos, because notifications are a lot better there than they are on this website, YouTube. So make sure to join that. If you want to email me for any reason, chazzahdf1@gmail.com. It's down below if you want to see it for yourself. And hopefully for the content coming up on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, you will join me for that. And until the Practice 3 watch along for the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, guys, it's been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.